Good morning, everyone. I'm going to pull you Zoom people onto the screen as well, just a little bit to the side so that I can see y'all too a little bit better. Well, good morning, everyone. I want to go ahead and keep us on time here, but just in case some of you don't know who I am, I think I've had a chance to meet everybody in the room and then as well as in person here. My name is Andrew Colson. Where did my mouse go? Okay. And this is just a peek into my life here a little bit. So my name is Andrew Colson. I am the Associate Director of In-State Recruitment. So basically at UAB. I serve as one of these state chairs for the SACAC Government Relations Committee. And so I've been in this role as co-chair for about 3 years. Last time I actually attended one of these advocacy days in person was 2019. So it's been a while. We hosted couple virtually the past couple of years here, so glad to be back in person here. And then of course I'm joined by my fellow co-chair here, Ms. Bailee Drummond.
Hey y'all, my name is Bailee Drummond. I'm an admissions counselor at UAB, so Andrew is my supervisor. And I work with Haley over there. She's on our in-state freshman team. And I've been in this role as the other co-chair for since August, roughly. So I attended virtually last year just as a guest, and then this year is my first year kind of hosting and planning. So,
yeah. And then for our people online, you guys will introduce yourself fairly soon here. So I really, for just sake of our room here too, and for the sake of our people online here, we could just like quickly just y'all tell us your name, where you're from. Yeah.
Oh, okay. My name is Haley Crum. Like Bailey said, I am one of the in-state recruiters at UAB.
Good morning, Trent Gilbert. I'm the Vice President for Enrollment Management at Birmingham Southern College. Hey, no, now you can see us. Hey, there we go. Trent Gilbert, Birmingham Southern College.
Hey everybody, I'm Jay Gibson. I'm the Associate Director of Transfer Student Recruitment at UAB. Hi Kelly.
Hey everybody, Katie Morgan from Auburn University. As of about 4 weeks ago, my new title is Coordinator of Enrollment Engagement, and I'm also the state chair for the state of Alabama for SACAC. So really glad to be here.
Well, great. Well, so thank you guys so much for indulging me there with those introductions, and thank you guys so much for attending today too. It's really important that we engage with our elected representatives, but we also just engage with the business of the state, especially as it pertains to our realm of profession. And so I really do want to emphasize that today is about learning. Today is about advocating for our students, advocating for our profession, and of course, if you so want to do, attending the legislative session a little bit later today. I also want to apologize. I just got Invisalign as of about 6 days ago. So I'm still learning how to speak again. So just bear with me on that one too, if I have any trip ups there. So quick overview of today's agenda. We have a couple of speakers. Obviously, 2 of them are present here on the Zoom call. And we also will have Representative Terri coming in at 11 today to talk to us a little bit more about state policy that is going to be under consideration during the legislative session this year. As well as some other things that might be in the pipeline, and then some overview of what has happened here recently, as well as far as educational policy updates. We'll also have speakers, Kelly Pietkiewicz from SACAC, the big government relations. She's kind of our guide through all of this on the state level, and so she oversees a couple different states within SACAC itself, splitting it with Jay DeMee. Who is the other co-chair for that committee, and she'll talk to us a little bit more about SACAC updates. Then of course we have David Hawkins from NACAC, who will talk to us a little bit more on the national policy side of things, give us a more high-level overview, then moving on into that state overview right after David finishes as well. And like I said too, all final actual discussion and presentations will be over roughly about 11:30 or so. So that'll give us plenty of time to eat lunch and prep and just move on over if we need to move our cars or anything like that in this room, and prep to go to the 12 o'clock legislative session, which should be accessible from this building via the 6th floor. House chambers are going to be accessible via that area as well too. So should be a fun day. For those of you who don't know about SACAC and government relations, I basically just pulled this directly from SACAC's website, but essentially our job is to provide kind of advocacy for the legislative process and its effect on our profession, but also to act as professionals who can communicate with our elected representatives on different policies that will be important to us as institutions, different policies that will be important to our students that we currently serve in our schools, but also, since I'm speaking to mostly the higher education audience here in post-secondary institutions, we also want to advocate for those policies that will affect those currently enrolled in secondary, primary education that look forward to that higher education realm in all different aspects, whether it be 2-year, 4-year education. And so our main duties, as far as the SACAC Government Relations Committee, Bailee and I, so we will, our main duties really kind of revolve around this day. So we prep for this just by connecting with those elected representatives, making sure they can be here to meet with us as representatives of our profession. We also try to keep things dynamic and sending out important updates to our members whenever possible in the state of Alabama to provide context on things that we should be aware of within the state of Alabama, but also just keeping aware of sometimes those national things too. David, I don't know if you guys know this, but does a great job of contributing to our NACAC institutional, or not institutional, but the NACAC, I think it's like every Tuesday, that newsletter that goes out with different kind of updates for the state of college admissions. And so that is a really, really useful tool that I constantly look at just as a kind of a nerdy aspect too, and that's kind of what we utilize as well too. And then we also like to provide a space for education, discussion, of course, advocacy for policies such as these. So it's not just legislative days. Given a bigger committee, we can obviously try to enact more kind of like educational webinars and things like that too. But we also want to be able to provide the space for things like this today, where you can come, learn, and also meet with your representatives all on the very same day. Make it nice and convenient for everyone who can attend in person, and of course, everyone who needs to attend online as well too. So with all that said, just a quick overview once again of who we are. I have Jade's face kind of blanked out by our Zoom people over here, but the people who are here today, we have Government Relations Committee, state and SACAC level. Once again, myself, Bailee, and then Kelly Pietkiewicz, who actually is coming from Tennessee, and then Jade coming from Georgia. So one thing I will just go ahead and point out real quick, just in case, I think we're all pretty involved in SACAC in here, at least in some way, but just for the sake of the recording, if you're interested in getting involved with SACAC, there are a couple of different things you could do. Of course, you can become a member of SACAC if you are not already. If you're on this call, most likely you probably are, but we have various committees through SACAC and be part of. Government Relations is just one of many. I have a list down here of all those different committees available: Government Relations, State Area Initiatives, which we do have a representative from, SAI, Katie Morgan over here. And we want to make sure that we are representative of all institutions and all people of all backgrounds. So, like I said, we have a pretty heavy post-secondary education population in this room right now, but this is open to anybody working who can be SACAC eligible for membership. So that's secondary educators, that's counselors, that's obviously community college level, 4-year level, what have you. We want to have those people here in the room to make this a more dynamic discussion. There are plenty of opportunities, not only join committees, but also just volunteer for different things too, whether it be drive-ins, whether it be, excuse me, other different kind of webinars and initiatives. And finally, this is also just as part of the benefits you have, that networking is one of the best things about SACAC, not only to get network with fellow professionals, but just like today, you have a chance to connect with your elected representatives and kind of get to know more about what's on the docket, but also help try to provide context for us to advocate for our profession and what would be best for our institutions and our students. Now, I've talked a lot today, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Kelly Pietkiewicz to give us a few SACAC updates, get us up to speed with things in the world. So Kelly, you can go ahead and take it away.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really sad to not be there. Alabama is like one of my favorite places from working at UAB. And so many friendly faces there in person. I'm glad that you all can make it today. Andrew and Bailee have worked so hard on this, and I just really commend them for the effort they've put in. I know it's really hard to swap to in person too, and sometimes you may think, oh, we just have small group here, but the effect y'all are going to have and the impact is still great. So please keep that in mind. We had a really small group at the Tennessee event 2 weeks ago, but are still getting emails back from people about the work that we did the day we were there. So just know the impact you have is great. I have the privilege to work with Andrew and Bailee in this capacity with the SACAC board. I oversee Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Florida in relation for government relations, but I get to work alongside Jay Dominic from Georgia, who is fantastic. She's at the Drew Charter School, and she oversees our other SACAC states with their government relation initiatives. But the best part of that job too is we get to work with David and learn so much great knowledge from David, and just get to work with him on trying to make some great changes in the college counseling and higher ed world. So I wanted to give a few updates this morning. I noticed that the Alabama Drive-In Workshop, the recording is available for anyone who wants to watch that on the member portal. Please feel free to do so. I did also want to do a plug for Summer Seminar. Summer Seminar is like one of my favorite SACAC activities I've ever done. It is a great program for new high school college counselors to attend, or people who have been in the profession for a long time to serve as faculty members to help train new high school college counselors. So the faculty applications are due March 20th. I'm currently one of the co-chairs for that. So if you have any questions about Summer Seminar, please reach out. It's at UNC Charlotte again this year, and it takes place July 17th through 20th. And typically we get to tour about 5 to 6 colleges. So that's just a really great opportunity for a brand new counselor to get to go and have those experiences. I did want to remind you all the Extending the Dream grant is due March 24th. That's an opportunity for SACAC members to get some grant funding to be able to execute different projects in their own communities, identify needs in your own backyard, and see how SACAC can help you in those efforts. So that application is due March 24th. And then last but not least, the annual conference. I know everyone's getting really excited about that. I'm a little nervous because David and I are working on a session and I have not done anything on it yet. So I hope he doesn't yell at me yet. But it's going to be an awesome time. It's in Jacksonville, Florida, April 23rd through the 25th. I do know, I think the hotel has already filled up, the hotel block, but they are working on some other partnerships with different hotels. I know there's a Marriott downtown, not that far away, that still has availability. But I just think it's a great chance for us all to get together and have this exchange of ideas. And just, I've heard so much from people lately, just being around your people, like seeing some of y'all in the room there in Alabama. I wish I was there to get to catch up with you all. We all understand the work we do. We get the work we do. And we get when we need to let loose and have a little bit of fun, so we're not constantly burned out on this work. And I just personally want to thank y'all for taking the time to come today. I think it shows how much you care about your state, you care about the colleges in your state, but most importantly, you care about the students. That's why we all do this work, is we want the best future possible for these students. So I just want to thank y'all for coming. I want to encourage everyone to get involved in SACAC in any way that you can. I think SACAC for a long time has looked like the Wizard of Oz curtain, like there's only a few people behind the curtain making the decisions. And that's not my experience having been on the board so far. It's been a great chance to get to meet other people. I think I see Catherine on this, who's currently on the board as well. She's joined us virtual. It's just a great opportunity to get involved and meet other people and learn. So I encourage you all to find ways to get plugged in, but you're taking the best step today by joining in this event and supporting Andrew and Bailee in these efforts. And I know y'all are going to have a great day. So if there's anything I can ever do to help, I'm happy to do so. Just let me know. And Katie, congrats on your promotion. That's awesome. But I'm glad to be here today. And if you need anything, please let me know.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kelly. And I really appreciate the time you took to provide all those good updates, and I will also just throw in a plug for the SACAC conference. Couldn't think of that word, conference. So if you haven't already signed up for the SACAC conference, it's always a good time to connect, and you might see some of these beautiful faces both on the TV, and then some of the not so beautiful faces you see at the podium in front of you as well to attend as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off. We are moving a little bit ahead of schedule here, but I want to go ahead and pass it off, if David is okay, to David for some NACAC updates.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much, Andrew. And I will right off the bat, while I am clumsily fumbling around to share my screen so that I can put this PowerPoint up. Oh, it says this will stop the other screen sharing. Is that okay? I'm going to say yes.
That is perfect. Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Let me get to where I need, PowerPoint. Slideshow. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
We good to go? Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So as I start off, I am going to repeat and amplify Kelly's thank you to all of you for taking time out of your daily work schedule to come and advocate. I always tell the story about having volunteered in a number of capacities, including being PTA president at my kids' elementary school. And that was a very challenging experience. I just know how much time it takes to step out of your daily duties and do something different. So
David, one second. I'm sorry. It looks like it's just saying that you're sharing your screen, but it's not actually showing anything.
Okay. Well, let's. My mouse is disappeared. All right, let's. Hold on just a second. I apologize. A little technical difficulty on my end. Can you still see me?
Yes, I can see you just fine. You're a little choppy.
Oh, how interesting. All right, let's try this again. Okay, so now we're back.
Yes.
Everything's cool. So while I have you in person here, just want to repeat the thanks. Having been on the PTA, being president of PTA, serving on PTA, but also being president, I just know how demanding it is to take time out of your daily life to do something extra. So I appreciate it. The students who don't even know what you're doing behind the scenes will appreciate it, and certainly your colleagues in the profession appreciate it. So let me see if I can go ahead and start my presentation again here. I'm going to select that. I'm going to share. And can you all see this presentation now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'll go ahead and throw it into the slideshow.
Perfect.
Everything good? All right. So here we are. We're at the title screen. That's a success. The next thing that I'll say, that the way I open up all of these presentations is that when it comes to advocacy, you are the expert. That is sometimes counterintuitive. I've worked with NACAC members. I've been at NACAC now for almost 23 years, and I've done so many fly-in programs here in Washington, worked with people in the States and here in DC who are visiting their legislators. And there is always, particularly for those who are doing it for the first time, is always a level of anxiety that accompanies these visits. And I always just am careful to emphasize that your role in this whole drama that plays out here in Washington or in your state capital, that is politics and policy, is to bring the expertise from your job, from what you see every day, to bear on the legislative process. I know a lot of people who've come to Washington before get very hung up in some of the details about what's going on inside the Capitol, how many votes it takes to invoke cloture. You don't need to know that stuff. That is what they pay people up here to do. And in your state capital, the most important thing is that you are ready to talk about the challenges that you face as a professional, the challenges that your institutions and your schools face, and the challenges that your students face. And you know that better than anybody else. In fact, Senator Richard Durbin here in Washington, he's from Illinois, once said the 6 most powerful words in any advocacy pitch are, "Let me tell you a story." So while data are always important, don't want to minimize the importance of that. The idea that you can help fill out the narrative about what we do in this profession to elected officials who don't often know the first thing about what we do. It's very rare that you get a legislator who actually knows much of anything about school counseling, about college admission, or the transition to post-secondary education. So you're talking to little more than lay people when you're in an office, an elected official's office. So with that in mind, just going to give you an overview of NACAC priorities. I think as you go potentially to either meet with legislators or you just want to learn about NACAC's advocacy, the framework that we approach this with, I just find it helpful to understand sort of where we're coming from, what our foundation is. So recently, we have sort of taken a fresh look at our advocacy efforts, and while they haven't changed all that much, we have started to place an emphasis on issues where our association has a unique expertise. And you'll see this is very intuitive. You'll get this right away. We'll walk through the issues that we also are going to support, but that where we may not be playing the leading role on simply because there may be other groups that are in the lead. There may be other areas of expertise that are really poised to be able to sort of speak with authority, where we can come in and fill in some of the details and lend our support where needed. So the areas where we are leading, these 3 areas are really core to our professional lives, our professional interests. Number 1, we talk about admission practices. And what is very important for us is that we advocate for student and equity-centered admission practices. A couple of things go into that priority. Number 1 is that NACAC was formed in 1937 to be an organization that really considers the student's perspective on the transition to college. I think the colleges that formed NACAC were aware that if all that were sort of driving our calculations were the institutional considerations, which are very important, but if that was all that was driving our considerations, then students could be seriously left behind in the conversation. There could be practices that are really detrimental to students. So NACAC was formed with this idea in mind that we have to keep students in mind as we're doing our admission practices. And recently, our ad hoc committee for the future of leadership in college admission, which was convened in 2019 and concluded in 2020, really laid out a charge for NACAC in the future to really elevate its equity focus. So in addition to being a student-centered sort of approach to admission policy and practice, this committee wanted us to also place a systemic commitment to equity at the center of our advocacy. So we'll talk about these in a little more detail as we go through, but just at a high level, you know that is going to be when we get a bill, when we are asked to evaluate or take a position on a bill or even just an issue, we're going to evaluate it through that lens when it comes to admissions. We're going to say, is this student-centered? Is this equity-centered? And then, of course, we're going to say, what does this mean for our members in admission? We've definitely run up on policies that have implications for admissions offices and officers. So we want to pay attention to all 3 of those. The second area is, again, sort of part of the fabric of NACAC, and that is professional responsibility and ethics for college admission counseling professionals. Another of NACAC's founding purposes was to, in order to make sure that students were protected in the admissions process, we had a code of ethics. And we still maintain that code of ethics, though many of you are aware that the Department of Justice initiated an action against NACAC based on antitrust grounds. And as a result of that, we had to eliminate several of the ethical practices that we used to enforce. And we took the additional step of moving out of an enforcement posture on these ethical principles, which we had done for more than 70 years, to a best practices model. And the main reason for that, of course, is that while we had settled the Department of Justice investigation and that was behind us, the idea that there could be other areas in our existing code of ethics that ran afoul of or that someone could allege to have run afoul of antitrust law, and as well as future ethical practices that could be discussed and even implemented. There was a lot of uncertainty about whether that could withstand the kind of scrutiny and the kind of expense that was involved in a Department of Justice inquiry. So we have now moved more towards a best practice stance on those ethical principles. And what we want to do is make sure that we are advocating for those best practices. We can't enforce them anymore, but we can certainly tell people, including policymakers, but also practitioners and those who are administrators and other stakeholders in schools and institutions, that these are the best practices and here's why they're important. That's where the advocacy comes in. Finally, the third area where we lead, of course, is the expansion of capacity and impact of school counselors and college advisors. Now, we've done that all along. That's something that, actually we've done a little bit of all of this all along, but we know that there is more to do. There's a great deal of research we could do to support school counselors and college advisors. And we know already from research the difference that they make. So with that in mind, I'll sort of skim through what these mean in practice, because that's great for a framework. It seems to make intuitive sense based on who we are. But what does it mean when the rubber hits the road? I think all of you are aware right now of the fact that we are currently in a Supreme Court sort of a deliberation in the Harvard and UNC cases that were brought by students for fair admissions is what they call themselves. We certainly are committed right now under our student and equity centered priority to defending the use of race conscious admission. Now, we know not all institutions do this. In fact, our research suggests that probably fewer than a third of institutions actually do. But understanding sort of the ethical landscape, the equity landscape, we just know that colleges are presented with very inequitable outcomes when it comes to the K-12 system. And, we have to figure out a way to essentially assess student potential in many, many different ways. And while race has for a long time not been used as a sort of a sole factor or a sort of you can't do quotas, you can't do sort of assigning points to a student just because of their race or ethnicity. It has been a factor among factors, that it is something that we consider as a contextual element to a student's application. So the reality of it is, of course, is that the Supreme Court is the grounds on which the Supreme Court is deliberating has become more narrow since the original Bakke decision back in 1978 on the use of race in admission. And it doesn't. I don't know that the Supreme Court would have taken these cases had they been intent on maintaining the status quo or essentially becoming more open to race in admission. So my educated guess is that we're going to get a decision that is either going to further restrict our use of race or ethnicity, or it's going to eliminate it altogether. And of course, when we say eliminate it altogether, there's different shades of meaning there. I think we've described it as a sort of an Armageddon scenario, is that they could essentially say you can't even be aware of race in any way, shape, or form. Given the Supreme Court's arguments back in October, I don't know that is as likely as maybe I think we've called it a tsunami. So it's not Armageddon, but it's still not pleasant. That perhaps the court will say you can't do this sort of box checking. This person is of a underrepresented race, and therefore they get put in a special category or anything like that, which is arguably already against the law. During oral arguments, even the conservative justices and the plaintiffs, for that matter, the attorneys for SFFA, acknowledged that if a student wrote in an essay that they were involved in an AME church, or if they were in a Black student organization, or if they were the head of the Latino student club, like that kind of contextual information can't be ignored. Because on the other side, if white students were writing this, that I was in let's say, the Daughters of American Revolution or something like that, you would certainly, that would be considered. And it is also a pretty significant tip-off that that student is probably white. So there's just ways in which in the application process, it's not really practical to completely be ignorant of a student's background. So it sounds to me like the court will probably come to a point where they say, you really can't in a systematic way consider race, but to the extent that students, sort of this information organically comes through, this is something you just practically can't ignore and therefore can consider. But that's just reading the tea leaves a little bit. We expect a decision in June, probably. The decisions will be issued through the spring, but they typically save these cases towards the latter part of the term, because they are often the most difficult to negotiate inside the court. But we're sort of tired of playing on the court's turf, or on the plaintiff's turf here. And our goal is to expand the playing field here. So as we advocate for race-conscious admission at the court level, we are also significantly accelerating our work on equity. Just last month, we held an Elevate Equity convening in Chicago, where we brought together admissions officers, college presidents, trustees, to work as institutional teams to start to develop ways in which we can expand the equity playing field, that we can do more, that we can reinvent the processes that we currently use in admission. And then, so also talk about what's within our power to do as admission offices and even as institutions, and then what different things legislatures might have to consider, or boards of trustees or other governing bodies. So we're really going to, that's one small step in a much larger picture where we issued a report in 2022 with the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, where we really laid out a vision for how we rethink college admission in service to equity. And I'll make sure that we can send around that link once we're done today. So that's a little bit of the flavor of the advocacy that we'll do in this area. For ethics, again, our focus is going to be, this is a little bit of non-traditional advocacy, that we want to communicate our standards with the public. That's a form of advocacy. We want to educate practitioners on what our best practices are. That's another form of advocacy. And then finally, when there are opportunities to advocate on behalf of, or advocate to lawmakers on behalf of ethical practice, we will do that. In fact, right now, you may have heard that the Department of Education here in Washington has issued a revised sort of guidance on third-party servicers, and that's going to have some pretty wide-reaching effects on all of us and certainly our institutions. But basically, the idea is that anyone who is working on your behalf, who might also be involved in activities related to recruitment and admission, such as online program managers and others who potentially sort applications or do any of that pre-reading sort of work on behalf of the institution, the department is saying they all should be subject to what we call the incentive compensation rule, which is a Higher Education Act requirement. And I won't get into the gory details at this point. We'll actually be doing more through our NACAC dissemination outlets. But the idea here is that the government is trying to protect students against highly incentivized commission recruitment that we've often seen in the for-profit sector, and is sort of bleeding over into the OPM sector a little bit. But the idea is that NACAC can be a voice to say, okay, we get the implications for fraud. We do not want institutions going out and hiring all these sort of slick, sort of misrepresentational salespeople to try to bring in classes. But at the same time, there are ways in which we actually utilize folks to help us process the significant burden on us. There are groups also like QuestBridge and the Posse Foundation that we work with, and there, yes, we do exchange funding to help support them. So there's just ways in which NACAC can take action here to essentially serve our profession, but also protect the students that are involved. So that's just one example of how we operationalize this priority. The other, of course, is you're probably well familiar with the abuses that have taken place in the for-profit sector. That's an area where we've been active for more than 2 decades and will likely remain so. And then finally, supporting school counselors and college advising. I think you all are probably familiar with the high student to counselor ratios across the country. A couple of years ago, we did a project where we looked at at student to counselor ratios based on school district, which is the map that you see here on the screen. The red areas show the highest student to counselor ratios, more than 500 to 1. The green areas show the lowest, at the lowest level, 250 students per counselor or fewer. And what was important about this, and what this is indicative of in terms of our new direction, our future direction, is that this is a great example of, we all knew the national student to counselor ratio was up in the high 400s to 1. It's since come down a little bit. And then, but we'd also started poking at the state ratios, and we knew that they varied. Most states cluster around the national average, but there were some like Arizona and California that were up around the 900 to 1,000 students per counselor. But even those state level ratios masked differences inside the state. So while a state might say, well, we're right at the national average, we're doing fine. Well, look at the map, and you actually see that inside the state, there's some pretty substantial variations. And it won't surprise you to know that a lot of the very urban areas and a lot of the very rural areas are the ones that have the largest discrepancies, who are in the most need of school counseling support. And then you tend to have the more wealthy urban and suburban areas that have more counselors for students. So our focus in the future on this is really going to be to dive into more research and continue to advocate for our mantra, which is to hire, train, and equip school counselors, as well as college advisors to help students find their way to post-secondary education. Another good example of our prior research on this is we used the Department of Education's high school longitudinal study to determine that that independent of any other factor, working with a school counselor one-on-one resulted in a student being 7 times more likely to apply for a FAFSA, 4 times more likely to enroll in post-secondary education of some form, and twice as likely to enroll in a 4-year institution. So that's independent of the student's attributes, their grades, their family income, their parents' level of education. That's a pretty significant difference. And we want to make sure that we're advocating to policymakers that school counselors and college advisors play a really important role. I'm going to breeze through some of the rest of this, and I certainly will open it up to Q&A, happy to answer questions, but just don't want anybody to think that we're going to forget about all these other really critical issues. College affordability, undocumented students, global student mobility, transfer, again, student protections against fraud and abuse. Those are all issues that we're going to rush to support when there are issues that we can help lend our voices to. And we certainly have levels of expertise in these areas that are important. We also just have some strength in numbers. NACAC now has more than 27,000 individuals in this association. And if we move as a unit, we could seriously affect policy. And as Kelly and Andrew were talking about earlier, even 5 people acting together can make a pretty significant difference. So it really is important for us to throw our weight behind these efforts when it is needed. At the federal level, I will say that the big issues right now, of course, are the Supreme Court decision, both federal and state level. I'd say maybe even more at the state level. Initiatives that seek to sort of target equity. I realize that it's probably like swimming up a raging river talking about this with a legislator, but I do think it's important that cooler heads prevail on this, that equity cannot be made into a cuss word, that we're not dealing with, we're dealing with real people here. And the idea is that we as NACAC certainly want to open the doors to post-secondary education to all who need it and all who seek it. And so whether you are from a rural area, whether you're from an urban area, whether you're Black or white or Latino or Asian American, everyone needs an equal shot. And I think that's something that everybody can and should get behind. And that's something we're paying very close attention to, because it does have implications for the future beyond the Supreme Court decision and just in general, something that is core to our values. We always watch education funding. Of course, we have our priority programs, and that is particularly where the states come in. States provide more than 90% of all education funding, both at K-12 and then when you talk about higher ed appropriations. Now, of course, student aid programs, the federal government provides much more money there, but a lot of important funding decisions are made at the state level. So that's something that we're that our affiliates are often engaged in, and that will come up in every cycle. I mentioned student protections, and then finally, there have been some bills introduced this week even on the financial aid notification letters that colleges send out. I would bet a lot that Congress will finally get around to implementing legislation this year that will require colleges to use at least standardized components in their aid award letters. But until Congress acts on that, we are actually working in concert with our colleagues at the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators on a task force that is coming up with some core principles for aid award notifications. And the idea is that would be a set of standards that we can point to as institutions, but we also hope it will influence the congressional debate, because Congress can pass legislation. It doesn't mean it's going to be good legislation. So we do want to make sure that our voices are heard and that we're at the table as these congressional offices are considering their individual bills. So I'll probably pause there because I know we're coming up on, we've got about 15 minutes till your next session. So I want to at least leave room for you to have a break, but also to have Q&A. I will just skim briefly through. We won't go through the coalitions, but note that there are some resources that if you're looking to learn more about NACAC's advocacy, I maintain the NACAC Wonk account on Twitter, and I do try to post there daily. Sometimes I don't, but there is a monthly legislative update, and then of course our bulletin and journal and website all have advocacy information in them. So as well as our updates, our news updates, they tend to have a lot of advocacy information. And that's really it. I want to close by thanking you again. I don't think I can ever thank you enough for taking time out of your day to advocate. And my email address is there. I would love to be a resource to you, whether it's to your affiliate or whether it's to you individually. If you have questions, if you just want to, if there's anything that you need to know at a federal or state level, I'm happy to talk to you, to walk through things. I will note too that my capacity is about to be expanded. We are going to hire. We've actually just gotten the confirmation letter on a new advocacy director here for NACAC. So that person will be working with me to take some of this work and really run with it. So lots more capacity to come. But thank you again, and I'll pause there for any Q&A, and I'll stop sharing my screen as well.
Great, awesome. Well, so David, I actually did have a follow-up question, if that's okay with everybody else. So I just, as far as the financial aid notifications, I actually was not aware that that's kind of in the pipeline for NACAC, as well as just, legislative debate. Could you speak more onto kind of what standards are currently being discussed on the NACAC level and kind of what kind of that whole proposal might look like? Absolutely.
In fact, I'm going to go to my screen here and copy out a link to put in the chat, because this is the official coalition, or not coalition. Yeah, it's a collaborative. We'll call it. There's a lot of names for this, for what we do here in DC, and it happens a lot. But this is the link that I just put in the chat. Are you all able to see the chat? I should ask that.
Yes, we are.
Okay. All right. Well, in any event, it's an easy website. It's collegeprice.org. At this point, this collaborative is working on a draft set of standards. And I will note that if you are familiar with the current NASPA standards or NACAC's, even NACAC's best practices, there's not going to be a huge departure, mainly because those standards have been very central. And in fact, the Department of Education has even sort of used similar standards. So this won't be a significant departure from current practice. But Andrew, I will follow up by saying that we're about to send out, and it probably, I'd say, be within the next few weeks, so as opposed to a few days, but there will be an opportunity for people to provide input on the draft standards, which have not yet been released. So stay tuned to NACAC for an opportunity to actually read the standards themselves and provide comment, because this is a critically important issue. I know our school counselors for many, many years have really been frustrated about not being able to compare aid award letters or even interpret some of them. But colleges have also, or these are very also important to colleges, because they operate within their own distinct, guidelines, and everybody, whether it's state requirements, federal requirements, institutional programs, there's just so many ways in which these notifications can be put together. So we're very interested in getting your feedback on that. And I expect that we'll probably, I'd be looking at, between now and late summer for this project to really come to fruition.
Thank you. I think we have a question in the chat. Give me one
Yeah.
second.
Oh,
Okay,
can I?
yes. Yeah, can't access the chat on the webinar side, so our online people may not have been able to see.
Oh, got it. Yes. Answer. Whoops, wait a minute. Okay, sorry. I think maybe deleted the question, but did I send it? This is great. Let's try this again. Here we go.
Yeah, here we go.
There, I just sent it to the.
Perfect. Yes. So that is now in the Q&A chat for anybody who's on the webinar. That is just collegeprice.org.
Yeah.
Website that you shared. Any questions from the group? Or
Hey, David, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Over here. I have a question. So I know the FAFSA, that change is kind of coming down the pipeline as well. Kind of moving from an EFC to an SAI and how all that would look. That kind of standardization of a financial aid notification letter, is that kind of coming with that as well? Like, I mean, is that just like, I guess, is it kind of one big thing altogether that, we're looking forward to? And then also, if you've heard anything about the FAFSA, I know at one point in time, about a month ago, I read that it was not on schedule, and that it could tamper with like some of those states that have state financial aid that they require a FAFSA for. If it's not open by October 1st, it can tamper with those deadlines as well.
Yeah. So I'll take your questions in reverse order there. We still have not heard a final answer from the Department of Ed on this year's FAFSA. So we don't know exactly what's happening with that. We've certainly seen the same reports, but right now the FSA, the Federal Student Aid Office, I'm part of several advisory groups, and all they've told us so far is to stand by. So we'll try to relate word as soon as we hear it for you. To your first question, those actually will be separate. That's good news, I think, that the revised FAFSA will be its own thing, because certainly that is a legislative, so that has ties to legislation that was passed a few years ago. So the revisions to the FAFSA will be one thing. And right now, the bills for financial aid notification standardization have only just been introduced in Congress. So they would have to create, they'd have to schedule markups on that. You'd have to have it passed by the House, passed by the Senate, reconciled, and then usually there's an effective date that comes sometime in the future. So I don't anticipate that legislative initiative on the aid award notification is going to happen anytime in the next academic year. The draft standards that NASFA and NACAC are working on, that may be available probably heading into the fall. But again, those will be voluntary standards. Those will be things that are, there's no real hard implementation deadline for that.
Well, David, I actually just have one more question too, and it kind of relates to the resources you highlighted there that NACAC provides. So education funding obviously is going to be one of those big things that all of our states could really use more leverage with, especially just when advocating for funding on the state level to make things easier for all of our students as well too. Does NACAC have any resources available for advocacy for professionals to bring forth that case to their elected representatives, as well as maybe any other resources you wanted to highlight real quick while we still had some time for our next speaker arrives?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, let me say that each state has a different setting. Now, at the federal level, yes, we absolutely have like resources that can be shared like that. At the state level, there are resources out there that talk about, like for instance, the state higher ed the SHIO it's the higher ed executive officers in each state have an association that do a great sort of higher ed funding report every year on state appropriations for higher ed. And one of the interesting results that they've been putting out year after year now is that we still haven't caught up with the level of funding that we had in 2008 prior to the recession. And the same thing is true on the K-12 side, and there's resources to share on those. Now, NACAC isn't the source of that information, but we can definitely point you in the right direction. And then just generally, Andrew, anytime there's an issue, we can always connect you, whether it's through NACAC or some other organization. So we can absolutely share information. And in fact, if there's anything you need, like in the moment, just shoot me an email afterwards and I'll make sure I find it for you.
Wonderful, great. Great, I think we're good on this end. Looks like the webinar chat has been pretty quiet here too. So David, I just want to thank you so much for your time today. And obviously Kelly too, thank you so much for your time too. At this time, yeah, sorry, David, I'll go ahead and let you go.
Oh, thank you. No, I was just going to say it's my pleasure. Thank you all again. And just let me know if you need anything from me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, David. Well, so at this time, for those of you guys who are on the webinar, and of course, my people in here, we have about 4 or 5 more minutes until our next speaker will show up here. So I do want to just kind of quickly highlight, and we'll have a quick little break here in case anyone just needs to take a quick little break. Just a reminder, an email I sent out yesterday to all those who were registered. We actually do have just a helpful little link from educationlabonale.com, just kind of an update on some things that are currently in process and under discussion in the legislative session, this session, maybe not exactly today, but definitely some things related to educational policy, as well as just a nice little breakdown on it. If you're not super familiar with how things go on the legislative side of things, it gives you a nice little breakdown too there. So like I said, we'll give it another 3-4 minutes here for our next speaker to show up and we'll get started here. But for those of you guys who are in the webinar, if you need to stand up, stretch your legs, walk away from your computer for a little bit, I'm going to put us on a mute here for just a quick second and we will come back as soon as our next speaker arrives. And for those of you who are in person, thank you.
We're muted until the speaker arrives.
Yeah.
working out for everybody?
Great.
Good. Or we have.
Yes, yeah, we do have some people online, but feel free to just kind of go up to the room, they can hear you from. your
Okay,
phone, so.
wherever I am.
Yes, and so everyone, everyone online, of course, everyone here, we have Representative Terri Collins here from District 8, House District 8,
Yes.
that is correct.
Yes.
And she's also head of the Educational Policy. I'm so
I
sorry.
chair Education Policy Committee, but I serve on Education Ways and Means. And so what I've been doing this morning, I'm gonna face this way as I will. Okay, y'all are the real people. Been watching Hamilton too much. But I, just got out of budget hearings, and that'll be the main thing that we do this year. I'm gonna guess y'all just kind of want a legislative update of what I think's gonna happen. Well, the main thing we're gonna do is appropriate money. That's what we're gonna do. And I believe I'm hearing from everybody, which is really exciting. The focus has got to be on things that don't need sustaining. In other words, we've got to get away from salaries and things like that that are gonna continue to need funding the next year and work on. I even loved hearing today, not just capital needs, but deferred maintenance needs. That then fixes and brings up a program and won't need it the next year. Those are the things I think we're gonna have to focus on. We are also in, when I got here in 2010, we worked on a budget where we literally had 1 billion less dollars to spend than they had appropriated the year before. And we owed back the rainy day trust fund within 4 years, $500 million. And yet every education group asked for more money at budget hearings that year. So we are in the flip side of that right now. We've got all this extra money, but if you think about it, it's like monopoly money. It's federal money that has infused the entire nation and economy, and it's about to go away. And we've been propping up things with that federal money, which have helped us spend more state money for things. But when the federal money goes away, all the things that we didn't do because we used federal money, well, we've got to backfill that with state money. And then we've got to fund the things that we've done that are just exponentially expensive, such as the Literacy Act that I passed, has to be sustained. The Numeracy Act we just passed, growing revenue. Our teams teachers, which are our math and science teachers, that we give, they actually, on top of the salary matrix, which was also huge increases the last few years, which trying to get us in a place so our teachers are better funded than anybody else around them, state-wise, which is good. That's what we wanted. Teams, teachers, math or science, technology, have an opportunity to make maybe up to $20,000 a year over the matrix, because we pay an additional $5,000 if you're willing to be a part of teams, give up tenure, be a math or on a contract 3 years, math and science teacher. We give $5,000 if you're nationally board certified. We give $5,000 if you are in a hard to teach rural area. I really don't remember that for $5,000 right now, but there is one out there. I hear it regularly. So, those are, we've got to sustain that. That increases, that doesn't go away. And so those are the things we're going to do. That's going to be the hardest thing, is what do we do? Do we set up the thing I heard today, this morning, from the finance director in the governor's office and from our fiscal office in the House, well, in the legislature. If we had the exact money in the rainy day fund, and which has to be paid back if we use any, and our budget stabilization fund right now that we had back in that 2000, we would have still gone into proration. Now, we've not had proration since we passed rolling reserve, my first bill I ever voted on. But it's still a threat looming out there because our budgets are so flexible, because most of our education is based on sales tax and income tax, which are our first revenues that decline in a recession. So budgeting is gonna be key. I think that's gonna be it. What do we do with our money? How can we find, especially one-time money? Do we rebate it? Do we just send some of it back? We've got too much, here you go. Or do we put it into infrastructure that actually pays a return on investment later on, which is my choice. It's not like we're a wealthy state. So we have it right now, a tiny bit of money back in everyone's pocket is a drop in the bucket. But altogether, that tiny bit of money could really make huge infrastructure changes that would benefit for years to come. So that'll be some of the things I think we'll see. I've had a workforce bill that does three things. It actually passed, I think, unanimously out of the House last year. But it does, it sets up a credential registry. And that credential registry would be decided and determined by the Alabama Workforce Council. So business leaders, what are the credentials of value for the high demand jobs that we need them in? And they would come out with that registry, not educators, just here's what we think would be of value. But the business community saying we need these credentials of value. So a credential registry, it sets that up. It lets you have more of a career pathway because of that. Also, it would set up using the Atlas, which is our online system, and it would truly set up a career pathway so that students and parents, families could look at this online system. They could see regionally, what are the high demand jobs in my area? They would also see, what does it take to get those jobs? Maybe it's a 4-year degree, maybe it's a master's, or maybe it's one of these in-demand credentials. And you can get that with an associate degree. You can do that. They can do all of that. And then it helps our workforce because they see, where do we have people, students that are moving towards on these pathways that would be there to fill our workforce needs in these areas where we're recruiting jobs. So it benefits workforce and the students tremendously. It's a career pathway set up. And then the last thing is the state school board last year, I think, they set up what was in this bill, but it's still in this bill because it requires every high school student to have a college or career ready indicator before they graduate. What this bill would do is probably move up the timeline they set, which I think is very doable. Even if you are a freshman or sophomore, if you're told you've still got 2 or 3 more years to get one of these. Now, I think we have 9 indicators at this point, but that means you score benchmark level on your ACT, or you've taken and scored appropriately on your IB or AP classes, or you dual enrolled, you actually have college credit under your belt. Those are that college ready side. Career ready side would be you score silver or gold on work keys, which means you're ready to enter our workforce at some level, or you've got a career technical focus of your high school path, or you've got a credential of value, just a credential, one or more credentials of value. Military is one. Anyway, we've got good indicators and we're moving up on the percentage of students that are already graduating with that. But we need that to be everybody. We don't need you to graduate and think you're qualified to do something when in reality, you are not. And so that's what that workforce bill is about. And I think we'll see that. So we will mainly appropriate money and decide what to do with all the billions of excess money and ARPA money and ESSER money and all of that. And you would think, well, how fun will that be? But trying to find one-time things that are sustainable is going to be a challenge. And so much of this, like ESSER funds, have gone straight into those local areas. So while we've been encouraging, it's not about salaries. And to be honest, right now, to hire people that you're going to have to pay your salary with that ESSER money, we are trying to still catch up from COVID. So that's not a terrible thing. But for them to think this is a long-term position, that's where it becomes dangerous. Because we're not gonna have money to sustain it. I would love to talk and hear y'all's questions now and just address any of those. Because we also, the last thing I'll say about this legislative session is that we have over 30 new people. So we really don't know where they're gonna be or what they're gonna think. I know that a lot of them ran on the very popular to talk about issue of school choice, which I am an advocate for. And if you ask them what school choice means, very few actually have a clear understanding of that, and almost none will say the exact same thing. So we do have some choices now that we need to improve on how they're working. I think that you'll see some bills about that, and you're gonna see lots of school choice, I think. So that's kind of what I'm hearing, but I'd love to hear what you're hearing and at least let you know my perspective on it. Any other thing?
I was gonna ask, how often you're working with the community college system? I deal with our transfer student population at that institution, so I'm dealing typically on a day-to-day basis with the community colleges, and obviously with career readiness and workforce and all that. I didn't know how often y'all were having those conversations. I'm sure they're here.
We have them regularly, and I actually live in Decatur where they're working on that innovation system, and it's rolling out. And I went to my local workforce meeting last week, and they did a presentation of how many students are just flying through those short-term courses that are based on high need in those areas about specific skill sets, whether it's bus drivers or large equipment and things like that. And the workforce area, the business community is actually, we could not put large equipment in every community college, but they're working around us and letting us use their equipment that they would then be training those people on. So we work closely with the community college. Dr. Baker was our first speaker today, and we missed budget hearings. He was under the weather with surgery, but he's back and they are doing good. We work closely with them. We have a good relationship with community college. We appreciate what they're doing for workforce needs, and
I feel like that's been a big push last couple of years with workforce.
I think they've benefited from a lot of the extraordinarily high budgets, but we need them doing the same thing too. Let's stay within our range of reality, because we're out of that budget wise. But it will come back. And if you look at what was happening the 2 years before the Great Recession, well, doesn't that look like we're doing these 2 years? So it was good. It was a good question though. Very much supportive of that, the workforce. But so is our higher education. I mean, most of our jobs, you need a bachelor's degree, if not a master's. I know all three of my children ended up with a master's degree, like a new bachelor's or whatever, but it did make a difference. So funding higher ed appropriately, making sure it's affordable, making sure, I know you saw that we require FAFSA for high school, and making sure that we're maximizing our Pell Grant potential. Very important. And I think while we increased dramatically last year, there were still a lot of waivers and things that went out, and I think you'll see that go up even more this current school year. So. Other things? I don't know if I
can put questions. I'm not sure if we've had any here. I did actually have a question for you though.
Okay, yeah.
So one of the proposals was for vouchers, I think that's about $6,000 for students regarding the school choice as well too. I'm just curious, where did that number come from, that specific?
Well, that number came from the what they would figure of the state appropriations. So the foundational funding, what goes out, which is really based more on teacher units than per student, but you can do the math and figure out the per student. So that's where it was. The department would figure that money, just so you know, while it had been around 56, then we heard 6,000, then it was 6,500. As of yesterday, I'm hearing it, because of the outrageous budget, it's 7,500. So, that, they are working on that legislation. I met with a group that's working on that. I think there are several people working on different types of, I don't think we're calling it a voucher anymore. I think we're calling it an education savings account, but how that would work. Where those boundaries are, I know in my mind, I think the goal I'm hearing from the group that's pushing the one you heard about, it's just really about parent choice. And while I understand that, I'm always gonna focus on transparency and accountability. And so I think if we're gonna give public tax dollars to fund things, we need to make sure that they are helping to increase student achievement. That, to me, should be our goal. And I think that we might be able to disconnect there on that issue. But I've said my thoughts and I've heard their thoughts, and we'll see where it lands. You know, that's the thing about 30 new people. I don't know where they'll be, so we'll see.
I think it's related to vouchers and choice and failing school, and I see a
Yes.
bill of transitioning that potential conversation towards not failing but fully supported. Now, does that mean that there's gonna be more financial support for failing schools so that they can? Is that part of it, that we're gonna give more money so that schools can better perform?
Here's, it's a three-part answer if you'll let me do that.
Yeah.
Okay. The governor's already put some extra money into that in turning around schools. If they've been consistently on that failing list, then they obviously need help. And I can assure you that throwing more money at it is not what they need. The things I think that will make the biggest difference is putting more money in accountable and transparent ways. So we know this works somewhere else, whether it's after school, high quality, after school enrichment, whether it's mentors, which is actual people in the room, but we know that makes a difference. And if it lifts them up, both the Literacy Act and the Numeracy, they focus not on a 6% like that failing school is, but on the bottom 5%. And what we've seen in the Literacy Act is of the, say, 55 schools in that bottom 5%, 30 lifted out of it, which is what we want. We want that to be a rolling bottom. We always have a bottom 5%, but if we're always lifting it, that's what we want. Teams Act has a focus on those areas. Numeracy actually has not just a focus on that area, but basically, if you're not changing it within so many years, then you have a choice to convert to a charter, close, or reconstitute completely. I think those dramatic things, which sound very dramatic, but if you're not turning it around on your own, you're gonna have to have help. You can't do things the same way and think you're gonna get a different outcome. And so those are some of the things. I think you've already seen additional money from the governor going in turnaround. So that is a good thing. I think in the past, the complaint I always heard is you're labeling us, but you're not doing anything to make a difference. But let me say, at very first, one of those failing schools was in my district. And while the state may or may not have been doing extra things for it, the local community did. I was mentoring already at that time in that school, but I saw businesses giving money for one-to-one devices at that time. I mean, the community supported it, and really, they were only on that list because of where they had been, it was a 3-year thing. They were really in the last of the 3 years, and they moved out of it, so they've not been there, which is good. Now, since then, we've also closed that school, and they're going to 2 different middle schools, not that one. But every system has to look at what's working best on theirs. One of the things I said for turnaround or for bottom failing or full support, seems like we had worked on that, and I didn't think full support was the wording he was going to use. I'm fine changing a label from failing, and maybe full support's a fine label. I'll have to think about that. But 2 things in the choices that we already have that nobody's looking at. And I always like to let people remind you, they're already there. In 13, when we passed the Accountability Act, the start of the Accountability Act, it was known as the Flexibility Act. And all that flexibility is still in the Accountability Act which gives tax credit money so that you can get scholarships for poverty students, so they have a choice to go to a private school if that's a better fit for them. Okay. At the end of that bill is still the Flexibility Act, so that any system could ask for a waiver from the department and say, I'd like to flex out of this bureaucracy or this state rule or something, anything. And here's my outcome I believe I can achieve if you'll let me not have to do that. Anyone can do that. So if you're upset about assessments or curriculum or anything that the department has deemed, you could use the flexibility side of that and say, because we are going to reach this achievement goal, we'd like to flex out of that requirement. You can do that right now. You've been able to do it since 2013. Okay, on the charter school, the other area of choice we already have that are all growing, that every single one of those schools is doing better than their surrounding schools, feeder schools, so to speak. Every one, they're not doing as well as we want them to do, but they're moving in the right direction, and I support that. We're not giving them any local funding right now, so they're doing it with a lot less money. And we're also not able to recruit some of those high power charters that you've seen around the nation that are really, really good, because we don't fund them appropriately, and they know that they're going to need it. Okay, but in that legislation, any public school district already there could become, their school board could become an authorizer. They could work with a foundation program or something like that and a management team. Those are the three legs to that school for a charter. And they could convert, like you've seen in Montgomery County, their problem area schools into charters to turn them around. And we're seeing lots of success in the ones. So I've been hoping that more school districts would choose to do that. And that is an option of choice. And that does address those bottom schools. And so we can already do some of the things, we just don't seem to choose to do that. Does that kind of answer? What we label it, I'm fine. I mean, I didn't, at one point, he had A through F and accountability at bottom 6%. And I'm like, you can't change A through F. I mean, F, we know what that means. But it's also not just based on one test score, which is what the bottom list is for. It's just on achievement. The A through F includes your growth, your achievement. We need to change our percentages of how we weight that. And I've said that for a while. If you have a 12th grade, you need to weight college and career ready over graduation rate, because it actually has meaning. I won't comment on the other. But we are in Alabama, we need to weight our growth higher than our achievement. But we want growth, so we need to weight that high. So those are the things I think you'll see. So yeah, I've supported his bill in the past and plan to do it again. I have to look at the language, have to remember what we even said last time. So good question though. Fixing our bottom schools, I've said this forever. We have pockets around Alabama of excellence. I mean, even here in Montgomery that we talk about very disparagingly, Lamp is often in the top 5 and 10 in the nation. So we have pockets of excellence all around. We have areas, I think this year on the NACAC, you saw little Piedmont with not a lot of revenue in the top. I can't remember, but I think they were in the top 10 in the nation in their advancement in their NAEP score. So we have some areas doing really good things with education. Don't get focused on where we are in some list to miss the good things too. People working hard. And that's what it's like. I appreciate those people. Good question. What else can I do?
I think that pretty much gives us time actually for our presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate you.
Well, my office is next door, and so right through that machine door. And so, if, y'all need something, y'all can let me know I'm in there. I think we go into session a little bit. It's very, ceremonial today, kind of, and then we go into a caucus meeting to hear what we're gonna go into tomorrow. So we'll see. It's a busy day, but I'm glad this is how it worked out for y'all. I hope it's been good. And you know how to get in touch with Adam, who's the best.
Yes, for sure.
Okay. Thank you. Well, nice to meet you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, well, and so everybody who's online too, that concludes our programming for today. So thank you so much for joining Legislative Day, and of course, everyone in person. Thank you guys so much for joining Legislative Day today. And you can be able to find this on SACAC's website too, this recording via the kind of back catalog for different meetings. So feel free to rewatch if you need to have any refreshers of anything that was gone over today. And thank you guys so much again for attending.